Thank you. I'd forgotten.
Who's next?
Just starting now. Nigel, can we go to you next?
Hi, Nigel Scott, Director at Gamos. So working with John, a lot of stuff on data and surveys and understanding how people cook.
Thank you. Will, let's go with Will Coley first, then Will Clement.
Hi, Will Coley here from University of Strathclyde, mostly working on MECS in Malawi.
Hi, I'm Will Clements. I'm at Bristol University and I've been working with PETA in Nepal.
Thank you. Let's continue the Clements theme and go with Anna next.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm working for Gamos on MECS in Tanzania.
Thank you. And then let's go back to Nepal. Biraj.
So hi, I'm Biraj Gautam. I work with PETA. So PETA is currently working on field research in electric cooking. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm struggling to see who else we have here, actually. John Barton.
Yeah. Hi, John Barton, Loughborough University, CREST, technical testing of appliances and batteries and systems, technical design of the pilot plants to go out with the MECS project.
Thank you. And next to Harry, and then on to Amai.
Hi there, Harry Parsons. I'm working for an organization called HIVOS. I'm working on the MECS project in Myanmar.
Hi everyone, Amai from ID Cambodia, conducting human-centered design research on how people cook, and also conducting experimental sales and market tests to demonstrate adoption of electric cooking.
Fantastic, thank you. I can't see who else we've got here because you're just little icons or initials. So if anyone else has not introduced themselves, please feel free to do so now.
Hi, this is Surendra from Nepal and working in the MECS project from PETA.
Hi, Sam Williamson from the University of Bristol. I work with PETA and Will, looking at off-grid electrification and electric cooking.
Okay, right. I think we've been through everyone. Or was that one last person?
Hi, I'm Joni Cook. I work at MECS HQ in Loughborough. I do communications to the programme, just interested in getting to know a bit more about the field methods that you're using at the moment.
Thanks, Joni. Last call. Okay, great. Well, this is a really exciting topic that we have today, one that's very close to my heart, and something that I think ties together a lot of the themes that we've already discussed on the seminar series, linking to the survey on cooking practices that we had a couple of sessions ago with Will Coley, sorry, always trying to remember to get the right surname on the end of Will, and the session that we had last time on typologies of food from Amai. So I'd like to pass over to our first presenter today, Jacob. So Jacob and I put together the Kenya eCookbook, which has started this now great domino chain of eCookbooks that are being developed around the world. So I'll pass on to Jacob and he can explain to us the thinking that went into the first eCookbook. Jacob, do you need me to share my screen or can you share your screen?
I'm sharing my screen now. What can you see? I've got two screens, so I don't know which one it's showing.
No, this is great. We're on the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Unless if you've maximized it on the other screen, then it is not maximized here. Yeah, that's great. Okay, over to you.
Oh, right. So I'll try rush through this because it was old now.
Sorry, Jacob. Sorry, I just forgot one thing actually. Just before you start, I forgot to ask for a note taker for this session. Apologies. Would anyone volunteer to take some notes that we can put up on the OneDrive for anyone who's not able to attend?
Yes, John, I'm happy to do some notes.
Fantastic. Thank you. Very much appreciated. Jacob, back to you.
Right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Kenyan eCookbook that came out sometime last summer in July. And as you can see, there's lots of different contributors from the people who are involved in the cooking, and then also contributing authors and so on. I'm going to talk about quickly who it's for, talk about some of the cooks and some of the processes we went through, so recording the recipes and some of the design decisions and why they were made. So it was originally conceived as a conventional cookbook for everyday cooks, but realized that cookbooks aren't that widely used in Kenya, and from lots of discussions, people used rather YouTube videos and other platforms, usually that contained video to learn about recipes. So then it kind of evolved into a document that had useful data on cooking and energy consumption, and kind of some of the techniques that you can use to save time, money, and energy. And it became a reference document for those working in the cooking and energy sectors. And it was designed in a modular fashion, so you could take different aspects of it. So there's pages on different appliances, different fuels, and so forth, and on the recipes, so they could be used in different kind of spheres. These are the 4 cooks. So this cookbook came out of a cooking diary study in Kenya. There was actually the second round of it, so it'd been done a year or 2 beforehand. Then this was another round of cooking diaries, and these are just for the participants in the cooking diaries, who we spent a day individually with each to record these recipes. So we have Christine, Damaris, Karen, and Judy. And Karen was also a numerator, so she was kind of more deeply involved in the whole process. So this is Damaris, and this is when we were at her house. So the basic process for recording the data for this cookbook was to spend a day with each of the cooks cooking 5 different dishes: ugali, rice, beans, sukuma wiki, and meat stew, I think. John, is that right? Anyway, 5 different dishes.
Wow, there's something extremely noisy. Jacob, if there's not anything noisy in your background, can I ask everyone can mute their microphone, please? Whoever AK is. AK? Agnes, yeah. Thank you, Agnes. Okay.
So this is at Damaris's house. As I was saying, we spent a day with each of the participants in the cookbook, cooking 5 different dishes. And as you can see, we cooked them on different appliances, and they're all metered up with lots of different devices. John would very diligently take notes as to when energy was being consumed. So, you know, whether it was frying or boiling, or when the lid was opened, for instance, on the electric pressure cooker. And I would then tend to ask questions about, you know, why it was being cooked in a certain way, about the ingredients and so forth. And would take lots of photos, and also with Maureen and Anne. So lots of questions, trying to determine, you know, why people were cooking in the way they were, and kind of trying to get as much detail about how, the processes. These are some of the dishes that were cooked. Even though we cooked the 5 different dishes, rice, sukuma wiki, meat, beans, and ugali, we decided to focus on beans, largely because they had the most interesting, the data was the most interesting from them, as I'll explain as we get deeper into the presentation. So as I was saying, the cookbook was designed in a modular fashion, so you could take different aspects of it. So just to try and present why you might use charcoal, benefits of charcoal, some reasons it wasn't such a good fuel to use, and where it was used mainly. This is a recipe page now. When we started, it was very text heavy, and we decided to strip it back as much as possible to try and make it as accessible as possible. So as you can see, a lot of the words that would have been used to describe processes got transformed into pictures and processes. So we had as little information as possible. On the left-hand side of the screen is the process for how to make that dish, yellow beans with green peppers and so on. On the right-hand side, meanwhile, we had some of the energy data, again, in as an accessible format as possible. So just showing the appliance, the cost of the cook for that particular dish, the time, and in the case of the fuels, of units of electricity or quantity of charcoal. And as you can see, there's huge differences in. This was especially acute when we were recording this data because there was a charcoal ban in Kenya at the time, which increased the cost of charcoal. And so you can see there's a fairly big difference between cooking on an electric pressure cooker and cooking using charcoal. And they're not always that significant, but generally there was a big saving to be made from using an electric pressure cooker or an efficient electric appliance, especially with beans. Again, this is a page just to talk about the electric pressure cooker and highlight some of the benefits of it as an appliance. So as well as the appliances, which made a big difference, there's various different techniques that you can employ to improve upon your time and energy saving when cooking. So soaking dried foods, for instance, simmering if you're using a hot plate with a lid on, cutting things smaller, using hot liquid instead of starting from cold. So we try to include as much practical advice possible to try and help people save energy when cooking. So these are the beans, some of which were used by the participants in the cooking diaries and in the cookbook gathering data. As you can see, the beans have different costs by them and are less or more expensive depending on how much they are at the market. However, once you include the cooking time, so the smaller beans take less time generally, you can see that they kind of aren't necessarily that much cheaper if you include how much fuel you use to cook them, which is quite an interesting outcome of the cookbook. And then at the end of the cookbook, we kind of went to the more technical side of it to start to compare different beans and how long they took to cook and different recipes the different implications of cooking in different ways using the recipes and different appliances. As you can see, the EPC is far more efficient at cooking beans than the others. And then this page here, these couple of pages here, are to try and talk about all the different variables that might go into cooking and talk about where you can save time and money and energy, obviously. So this was all put together in this eCookBook, which, as I said, came out last year in the summer. And this is front cover, back cover, and I'm sure many of you will have seen it. Was there anything I missed there, John?
No, I think that's a good overview. I was kind of multitasking because one of our other presenters is not able to make it, it seems. So I might take over and do the Tanzania eCookBook after you. But given that I've seen that presentation before and it's been really good last time you did it, it was probably just as good this time.
So I rushed through it. But anyway, I could take questions later. I didn't go much into the putting together of it. But yeah, I guess we'll come across that with others.
Yeah, but does anyone have any burning questions now, or should we power on? We've got a few more cookbooks and kitchen laboratory reports to go through, so we can take some urgent questions now if there are any. If not, we'll go on to the next presenter. Okay. Well, I will hold off on the Tanzania eCookBook in case Katerina is able to join us at some point today. So I'll shuffle that to the end. And then maybe I could ask Agnes, now that you are with us, are you able to go next and take us through the Jikoni Magic eCookBook?
John, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted, and also Agnes was muted. But now Agnes is unmuted. Agnes, are you with us?
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
I want to connect my earphones.
I didn't catch all of that. Do you mind just repeating? Agnes, you're muted again.
Hello.
Hello.
You can hear me.
Just about. It's not the best connection, but I think we can continue like this.
Maybe if you can skip to someone else. Something has happened to my earphones. I don't know what has gone on. I want to use the earphones.
Okay.
That will be much better. Yeah.
All right, sure. Well, let's skip on to Biraj. And Biraj, it seems your wish has come true. We now have some extra time, so please do take 10 minutes to talk us through your kitchen laboratory report.
Thank you, John. So let me share my.
Are you able to share your screen, or do you want me to share mine?
Share screen. I don't know. Is it coming?
Yes, I can see myself.
Okay. Is it no? Can I? So is it visible my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Hello everyone. So I just wanted to give you like brief information about the kitchen laboratory experiment we did in PIDA laboratory. So this is the team that we are in our research. So PIDA, University of Bristol and CAPEC is doing this research, and this was supported by MECS. So PIDA is an NGO based in Kathmandu. So we are mostly working in energy axis. So before going through the presentation, I would like to give brief summary of how we cook in Nepal. So pressure cooker is quite popular in Nepal. So we have been using it for a long time. While doing the research in electric cooking, PIDA and all the team did a research in 2018 in one of the micro power community in Western Nepal. In that research, we introduced different types of cooking equipment such as energy storage cooker, infrared cooker, induction cooker, and EPC. During that study, we found that EPC was least preferred by the users, and induction hub was best preferred. Hence, our team designed next research project with the induction hub. Last year, during the CCF Kenya, John Leary and his team demonstrated EPC cooking in Kenya. That was the best technology demonstration I have ever been to. The team showed how efficient and easy the EPC over the traditional cooking technology in Kenya. So on my return, so I had a several time discussion with our team that the benefit and easiness that I saw in Kenya about the EPC. Then we decided to do a quick laboratory research to find out what it is. So the EPC and find out differences between existing technology versus EPC. The research can be done in several ways, but we decided to do our first research in the very common food that is cooked in Nepal using two different technology, induction off plus pressure cooker and EPC. So my presentation briefly summarizes about what we learned during these testings. It was conducted during November and December 2019 and January 2020 for 27 days. So these are the equipments we used. So induction hub, it was maximum 1200 watt, but for our all research, we used 1000 watt. And also we have this and 5-liter pressure cooker. In the other hand, we have this Electron branded EPC, which consumes maximum 900 watt. So these are the technologies we used, and our objective was to conduct the comparative study of induction cooker plus pressure cooker and electric pressure cooker. Practical experiment of cooking in Nepalese cuisine in electric cookers by exploring the relationship between energy use and time taken. Also, we evaluated the quality, performance, and safety of these cookers to understand the adoption and challenges in Nepal. So this was our methodology, visual screening and kitchen performance test. So these are the few equipments we used: EPC, digital weighing mixer, pressure cooker, and all these measuring equipments. And this is the quick picture of our laboratory, how we did it. So in our experiment, as I mentioned, we cooked Nepali popular cuisines: rice, pulses, vegetables, beans, and meat. So during the experiment, we found that energy consumption for both induction and EPC was similar for rice, which was less than 1200 gram. However, for the greater weight of rice, the energy consumption is more in the induction compared to EPC. Simultaneously, the differences in energy consumption was greater with the increasing quantity of rice. So in the first graph, it is clear that EPC is more efficient with greater quantity of rice. In terms of cooking time, EPC took more time than induction hob in all categorized at its required preheating process. The preheating time for our EPC varied with the weight of rice and water temperature. However, minimum preheating time for rice was 12 minutes. Similarly, the energy consumption for the pulses, we used the red pulse and black pulse that is popular in Nepal. So in the induction, plus pressure cooker, it took around 19 minutes to cook about 300 grams of red pulses, where it took around 37 minutes to cook same amount of black pulses. So in both the cases, EPC consumed less energy, whereas induction plus pressure cooker consumed higher energy, but the time taken was in the lower quantity, and red pulses, EPC took longer time. When the black pulses, the time was similar to induction plus pressure cooker. Also, we cooked the meat. For meat, electric cooking test was carried out for chicken and mutton separately. Mutton is usually cooked in Nepal under the pressure. Thus, for both the induction and EPC cooking, method was similar as shown in the table. The cooking time for the mutton is similar for both kind of pots, electric pressure cooker and pressure cooker. Still, the energy consumption in EPC was slightly lower. When we came to chicken, so the chicken cooked in pressure cooker was less preferred by the people who used that later. So in the nutshell, what we found was less quantity of rice. Induction plus pressure cooker was appropriate in terms of time and energy consumption. Similar things we found in the pulses as well. So for the higher number of family size, we found the EPC was good for the beans, meats, and all of them. And for the vegetables, so it was a little bit different. For the vegetable, control cooking test for the vegetable was relatively complicated, unlike the rice, pulses, and meat. Cooking vegetable is not so much linear. Cooking type of vegetable is less about technical and more about cultural. There was not pre-use indicator as a certain and well-defined state for cooked food in terms of vegetables. In other words, freshness of vegetables, type of vegetables, personal choice of degree of rawness, slices of vegetables, extended fried cooking, use of spices, and other many factors that directly interfere the cooking time and hence the energy consumption. However, in generally style vegetable cook will be EPC. The time consumption extended from 7 minutes to 40 minutes depending upon the way it was cooked, whereas energy consumption data from all experiment consumed from 200 watt hour to 700 watt hour. So while doing this, we find little bit challenges. So food quantity varied depending upon the number of staff. So in our experiment, we did not do the exact amount of 1,000 gram or 500 gram. It depended on the number of staffs that we had to cook for that day. That's why we have like in the range. We have the information in the range. Some of the things we missed was standardized control cooking test under ideal cooking condition was not monitored very perfectly. Uneven cooking happened to some extent during slow cooking test. And the number of tests we did was for 27 days. That means like three different types of ranges of rice cooking. It was roughly 7 to 8 days. In the EPC, the difficult was when there was power cut, then we also had to go back to the kitchen and restart the cooking. So what we want is like it should be like washing machine. So when there is power cut, then it stops somewhere, and when there is again power available, then it starts out automatically. Then we are more independent on the eCook. And also what we found is like when we cook all the EPC, then it took longer time than we had expected. So what we saw is, using different pot might be one solution. And in our cooking, we also did not have, fixed ambient temperature. The ambient temperature was 11 degree to 16 degrees Celsius, which was not addressed for the result. In synopsis, EPC was a great technology. All the food cooked in had great taste for all the staffs. We served the food later. It might be because it distributes heat thoroughly in the cooking pot, and it is used mix of slow and fast cooking, making all the material cooked in the same manner. However, cooking in only one pot means lots of time. That might reduce the convenience. So in my house also mix of induction and EPC is working quite well. So that is the synopsis of what we have from our laboratory test.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Biraj. I like your ending in that all the food was just as delicious, if not more so. Can I just ask a very quick clarification? Perhaps I missed this when I just had to pop out briefly. The cooking on the induction stove, you show a picture of a stovetop pressure cooker. Was the cooking on the induction stove in a normal pot, unpressurized, or was it in the pressurized pot?
Pardon, John?
So my question is, you have your whole report is stacking up the induction stove versus the EPC, right?
Yes.
So my question is, the measurements for induction stove, are they unpressurized or are they with a stovetop pressure cooker on top of the induction stove?
Yes, for our studies, we used like induction and pressure cooker, like single pot, that pressure cooker, and EPC.
Yeah.
We did not use open pot for this data collection because we wanted to know what is the difference between pressure cooker plus induction and EPC.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes,
does anyone else have any quick questions or clarifications for Biraj before we move on to our next speakers? Okay, in that case, Agnes, can I ask, have you managed to sort out your earphones? Would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'd like to go next. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Would you like me to share my screen so that people can see your cookbook?
Yes, please. Yes, please, because I'm just on my phone and I don't know how to do that on the phone. So yeah, kindly.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen now, including you, Agnes? Can you see my screen?
Okay. Yeah, I can see it.
Okay, great. All right, take it away.
Okay. Okay, so how do I put it? Yeah, so the thoughts that went first of all, the people we were targeting to buy the EPCs, okay, or just basically most Kenyans, the way we've been cultured and introduced into using pressure cookers, the stove, is just to flavor, and there's no diversity when it comes to the foods that can be done in the pressure cooker. It's either you're boiling to put in the fridge so that the day you want to cook them, you just pull them out and cook, or if it's meat, same thing, just boil, put in your freezer. So the reason why we decided, when I say we, it's Monica and I. Monica is the one in charge of media within Jikoni Magic. We decided to make it in a way that would show people the diversity of using the pressure cookers, and also to show them that you can use very many other ingredients. Okay, so now when we come to the first page, John, can you make it bigger? I can barely see. It's just so tiny.
Yeah. When you say the first page, do you mean the first page with a recipe on? Beef?
No. As in, we start from just the go back. Sorry, when I shouldn't have said that. Is it introduction? Just keep going back. Okay. Are we there? Yeah, that's it. If you could just make it slightly bigger, that I can see. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. So now, when we look at that very first page, we just introduced the book, told people what to expect. Okay, when you look at it, just so that people don't feel that they are being, being put, I'm struggling to find the English word. So they're not sort of being forced to actually follow the recipes as they are, word for word, ingredient for ingredient, and measure for measure. So we just tell them that you can always personalize, customize, let it be to your liking. You don't necessarily have to follow the recipes as we've done them, so that you can make, so that the EPCs will become more attractive to them. And the other thing is, we've also, in the recipe book, we've also made sure that we've told people how to actually use the pressure cooker. Don't use stuff that is going to scratch, how you're going to seal the pressure cooker, so that when you're using, you're not so confused as to what you're supposed to be looking at, or following. So now, John, if you can just go to the next page. Yeah, so now, let's just settle on the beef. So we tried to include as much diversity as we could. Kenyans love their beef. They love this food that we call Iveri, and it's got various versions of it. So we included that. We also showed that you can use things like rice and all. So now when you look at, okay, before I even go to the recipes themselves, the other thing is we also wanted to show that you don't have to straight up just boil your food. So that's why we started by introducing this beef recipe, by showing that you can actually brown and go on to cook, and the cost will not be too much, because the questions that people would ask were, isn't it going to be expensive? Because Kenyans, we've been cultured to believe that electricity is very, 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 very expensive. So yeah, we really went into details to show that even if you start by browning your meat, building the flavor, you're still not going to end up using even more than a unit of electricity. And then it's a very visual book. As we keep going through it, you'll see. So we decided again to make sure that people get attracted to the very good images that we're going to put there. So we took our time trying to get a good final shot, arranging the ingredients, step by step taking pictures of what they were actually supposed to expect as they keep going on with the recipes. Yeah, I think that's like about it. So now the next is just showing you basically the step by step, like John is now showing in this picture. I mean, the page, every step has a picture. That was our aim, to make it attractive, so that it's not just any other recipe book that got too much words, because, well, that's going to be a turn off for most people. The other thing is, let's go to the Mozokoi, John. I think it's the one that is next. Yeah, so Mozokoi is a mixture of beans and maize. So it's got very many variations to it. So for this one, I think, yeah, we use sorry. Yeah, so for the Mozokoi, it's one of the very long cooking foods that take like 3 hours to cook. So the reason it's included in this book is to just show people that it will take a shorter time to cook and it's not going to be as expensive to cook. It's one of those foods that are really loved. And then the next recipe, John, let's just move on to it. It's all for incorporating different ingredients. So we wanted to really keep up with the English is escaping me. We really wanted to keep up with the theme of you can use so many ingredients to bring flavor to your food. So this next recipe is brown rice, which is quite difficult to cook. It's hard to cook. So we just introduced it to show that you can actually cook it in the pressure cooker, and it's very easy, it will come out perfectly, and you can also incorporate coconut into it. So basically, I think our recipe book, when you go through it, you will just see there's a common theme of you can use as many ingredients and you can draw flavor. And plus, one important thing that I'm almost forgetting is that we have incorporated how much each recipe costs. Because at the bottom, like for this page that we are on, it shows the electricity and the cost in terms of kilowatt hour, and it's also showing the amount of shillings when converted. So that's the average that people are going to expect when they cook their food, this particular meal. So it might cost more, it might cost less, depending on how efficient you are with your pressure cooker. So yeah, and then on the very final page, John, if you can just keep going. On the very final page, we made sure that we included some of the things that could not fit into the regular recipes, into the recipes that you are doing. If you could kindly enlarge it, John, so that I can also see what it says. Yeah, thank you. So let's go to the top of the page, please. Yeah, so there are some food, there are some instructions that could not fit into the recipes. So we decided to put them at the very back. So at the back, foods like beef, chicken, just basically foods that release their own juices. We made sure that we told people, when you start cooking these foods, use less water. It's just additional instructions so that people don't run into difficulties. We tried to make the EPC as easy as we possibly could. And the other thing is tough to do, like with rice. It's very different the way you cook rice on top of your stove and the way you do it in a pressure cooker, and the way you'd also do it inside a stovetop pressure cooker, because we had to twist the mentality of people from the stovetop that makes all that noise, screaming noise when it's releasing pressure, to this EPC. So basically that is what the whole book is all about. Yeah. So unless someone really has a question, because it's really, really repetitive. Once you start doing one, as in not repetitive the recipes, but repetitive the theme that is throughout the whole book. This is just a recipe book. It's not doing research and yeah. So unless someone has a quick question, I think that's basically what our thought process was when making the book.
Thank you, Agnes. And I forgot to introduce you at the start. We did a round of introductions at the very beginning of the call today. And I think the sound was a bit garbled when you started presenting. So maybe you introduced yourself, but I should have done it at the beginning anyway. This is Agnes Galyonge, who is one of our Challenge Fund winners. She's a social media personality who produces YouTube and Instagram and other social media content showing Kenyans how to cook delicious food. And her take on the eCookBook was to take the idea of cooking in an electric pressure cooker and show Kenyans how to make the same or even more delicious food in this new device. I'm going to move on there because we are running a bit tight for time now. I've seen Katerina has arrived, but I know there was a mix-up with the time difference. So I'm not sure whether she's going to be able to present. Katerina, if you're listening now, would you like to present, or shall I take us through the Tanzania eCookBook very quickly? If you're speaking, Katerina, you are muted. Okay, so I'm going to assume that Katerina is not able to speak now. She did say she's out in the field at the moment. So Katerina is from Tatedo, who are our partner organization in Tanzania. And they've produced a Tanzanian eCookBook, which should be released very soon. Katerina, I see you've unmuted.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Please take it away, but please try to be brief because we don't have a huge amount of time left on the call. So if I could hand over to you for 5 minutes, and if you could take us through the cookbook. I have the cookbook up on my screen, so I think, can you see the cookbook?
Maybe I can say some few words because we are on the way,
Sure.
and the network is not so good. I'm not sure if you can get me well.
We can hear you.
Okay.
Please go ahead.
So, hello? Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
I think the network is not good on my side.
We can hear you. Keep talking, Katerina.
Okay. I'm Katerina, as you have introduced me. I was a main author of Tanzania. We had some few ideas when we were writing it, but we had your guidance as well. We thought for Tanzanians, we needed to have something which will raise awareness on e-cook issues. So we could start with where all this started. So we started by introducing a little bit about the e-cook diaries you did, which was led by you, John. So we introduced it a little bit and recall some information from there. Then we talked about the situation in Tanzania, how the situation is worse, using we can call them not clean fuels, and then introducing the modern appliances that could solve the problem of the current situation. As we can see on the screen, which is currently displayed now, is for Albina, who participated in the eCook on the cooking diaries you did, and this was her evidence about what happened after starting to use the APCs. So we could show a little bit about what have been done so far with the modern appliances. And we thought it could be good to have Tanzanian recipes, at least to show how APCs can be used to cook our foodstuffs. That is on chapter 4. So with your advice, we could make it more attractive and more useful by adding the cost and the units used, the relation of the foods, how where they costful in comparison to one another. And lastly, we introduced a little bit about how we can improve our cooking practices by using efficient cooking practices. On next chapter, I think it's chapter 5. So we think this will be something which is a tool of raising awareness that will help more people, even the government, especially in last sessions of cooking policies, recommendations that will help them making decisions which will be according to the needs of cooking modern services. I think that is a little bit we could share. As for now, we are on the way from fieldworks. I could not join properly as we prepared. We'll continue making it more available to everyone after some few days after completing it. Hi, John.
Thank you very much, Katerina. We very much appreciate you being able to join us, especially since you're on the road. Was there one final comment you wanted to make?
Pardon? Hello.
Sorry, I was just asking whether there was anything else that you wanted to say. I thought I might have cut you off.
I can't get you where. I'm not in a good location now. You're passing somewhere. Can't get you where. But I have enjoyed the session. And the eCook diary is very important. And we have managed to add the cooking diaries and measurements we had when we were preparing our recipes. So these sessions are very useful. I'm in good location, I can get well what others are sharing, like what Agnes have shared currently.
Okay, I'm finding it a little bit hard to hear you now, Katerina, but I think we should probably move on anyway. I think we are going to run a little bit over time. So I just wanted to say, if anyone does want to drop off between now and the end of the hour, which is when this call was scheduled to finish, maybe you have another call, maybe you've got lunch to make, then please do feel free to leave when it's convenient for you. This session is being recorded, so I will send around the recording as soon as we finished and I've uploaded it onto YouTube. So thank you to Katerina for joining us. I very much appreciate you being able to participate even though you are on the road. I'll move on to my presentation now on the kitchen laboratory process itself. So if you could just mute your microphone now, and we'll move on to the PowerPoint. Thank you, Katrina. Katrina, do you mind just pressing mute on your microphone just so we don't have the background noise? Maybe I can mute you. Okay, I've muted you, I'm afraid, Katrina. Sorry, we can unmute you back in the discussion at the end if there's time. Okay, so on to the final part of our session today, which is on the kitchen laboratory process. So we've heard from a few of our different authors from people who produced eCookBooks, and from Biraj and the team in Nepal who have, sorry, there's a message popping up my screen now. Can people see my screen okay? It was just asking me about recording permissions.
Yeah, we can.
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, good, thank you. I will continue then. Yes, we heard from a few authors of different cookbooks, and we've heard from another group who have started doing kitchen laboratory experiments. But what I want to do in this final section was just to talk through the thinking process behind the kitchen laboratory, rather than just considering it as an activity where you just tinker about with some energy meters in the kitchen without kind of any prior thought. I think this is something that can help provide some structure to some of the people who are now considering carrying out their own kitchen laboratory experiments with the end goal of producing an e-cookbook for the country in which they are focusing. So overall, I see it as a methodology for matching modern energy cooking devices with cultural cooking patterns. So unlike other fuels, where often there's typically one stove which can do an entire, can do all the cooking for a household, often electric appliances are very specialized. So working out which appliances fit best with the specific foods that people cook in each place is quite a task in itself, which is what this process is designed to address. So the key ingredient in this whole process we see as the cook themselves. It's not the process, it's not the devices, it's understanding the cook, how they cook. Sorry, we've got someone with a very noisy microphone. If you could just mute please. Thank you. So the key ingredient is the cook. So understanding how people currently cook and how they aspire to cook can enable us to identify the opportunities to create aspirational cooking solutions. It's a three-phase methodology, which starts with defining and understanding the menu, then matching food categories with cooking devices, which then enables us to take the key opportunities that we've identified and showcase them in something like an e-cookbook. So this is just the same three stages put vertically into columns. In the first stage, you really want to understand what it is that people are cooking. So you start by producing just a list of dishes. Then you think about the recipes. So how is each of those dishes cooked? And then you can categorize those into a typology. As we saw last session, Amaya's typology of foods for Khmer foods is one great way of showing how similar dishes are similar in terms of the cooking process. And then it's also important to understand how often each dish is cooked. If it's just once every few months, then it's not really important for everyday cooking, which is what we're particularly concerned with. Then matching of the cooking devices with the foods. So once we know what foods people are cooking, there are some foods that will work really well on some devices and not very well on others. So this is about constructing a set of matrices or tables whereby you can have the appliances on one side and the cooking fuels on the other side, and you can judge them against each other. How well does that food tackle that particular, or how will that appliance tackle that particular food? And you can think about that in terms of cost, in terms of cooking time, in terms of usability. And then finally, highlighting those opportunities for where e-cooking or cooking with other forms of modern energy can have the greatest impact. That means that you can produce much more digestible outputs, such as the eCookBook, live cooking demonstrations, TV shows, or social media content. So how do you get this information? Well, we see it as an iterative process. It's not necessarily something that you can just do straight away. It requires several layers, and here we've got three such layers. In the first layer, then it depends a lot on how familiar the research team are with local cuisine. So if you're an insider, if you are someone from that culture, you can simply self-report a lot of that data in the first pass. However, if you're an outsider, you may wish to do this with an interview with someone who is an insider. And then you can perform for each of these categories that you've identified a single controlled or uncontrolled cooking test. I'll come back to what those are in one of the subsequent slides. So once you've got that first pass of this entire process, then you can go on to a second pass at which you refine the data that you're able to get. You can do this by bringing in more people through focus groups, by reviewing secondary sources, other people's cookbooks, for example. And then you can do more controlled cooking tests, more uncontrolled cooking tests. Like we saw with Biraj in his presentation from the PETA kitchen, then by doing multiple tests and getting averages, you get much more reliable results. And then in the third pass, then you can broaden out and you can use something like Will's survey to get data from much more people on what it is that they're cooking, how often they cook them, for example. You can do something more uncontrolled, like the cooking diaries, where you leave people to cook themselves for several weeks and you just ask them to write down what it is that they're cooking. Participant observation, where you're observing people, and other things such as discrete choice modeling can come in here. More elaborate methodologies that once you have a rough idea of what it is that you're looking at, the cultural shape of cooking in a particular place, and a rough idea of which appliances might be a good match, you can really start to expand and gather much more or more granular data. And then finally, averaging the results from those controlled cooking tests across different dishes within each food category, across different cooks, and then repeating for each of those conditions can get you much more reliable results. So the controlled cooking test, it's something that was designed to offer a much more representative measurement of fuel consumption than the water boiling test, which was the standard in the cook stove era, because it takes the cook and it takes the food out of the process and gives you something that's very repeatable, but not very representative of how real people cook. So both of these CCTs and UCTs are based upon real foods and they can be adapted to local cuisine. But the key difference between them is that the test defines, or the tester defines, which dish and meal is cooked in the controlled cooking test, whereas in the uncontrolled cooking test, it's left up to the cook. So both of them are focused on the kitchen, on a single dish or single meal, as opposed to the cooking diaries or the kitchen performance test, which is broader. And the kitchen laboratory itself, it aims to guide this kind of methodology, this process can guide which dishes you cook and how to collate and interpret the results in the context of what makes up a typical household menu. So these are 2 pages from the Kenya cookbook, the beans and cereals edition. What we have on the left is essentially an uncontrolled cooking test. We did specify that we wanted the cooks to cook beans, but we didn't say how, which recipe, which type of bean, etc. We just left them to it. On the right, it's much more of a controlled cooking test. Same beans, same cooking recipe, just different fuels. Much more repeatable in that sense, but much less reflective of real life. So on to the typologies of food, kind of following off from where we left off in the last session with Amai's typology of Khmer food, then this typology, I mean, there's many ways that you could construct a typology of food, but this typology in particular is around the lens of appliance selection. So categorizing the foods by cooking process, often the appliance is designed to do a particular process well, and then cooking time, so therefore an indication of the energy that's likely to be used, and any other unusual practices. For example, a dish that needs to be boiled like rice and simply left with the lid on may require a different appliance to one that needs to be boiled and stirred, such as ugali, for example. Okay, so on to the attempt to kind of classify these different dishes. This is, again, inspired by Amaya's visual representation of Khmer food. So taking Kenyan food and then thinking about the different processes that are used to cook typical dishes. This is expanding upon Will Coley's category of meat from the survey. So when he asked people in Malawi, how often do you eat meat? People would say, okay, well, maybe like every day I eat meat, or once a week. And that's okay, that's useful information. But when you come to think about how do you pick an appliance to cook meat, then actually you want to know a bit more. You want to know, is it pilau? Is it boiled and then shallow fried? Maybe you toast some spices. Is it a samosa, in which case you shallow fry first and then you deep fry? Or is it stew, in which case you boil and then fry? So there's often very little correlation between the cooking processes if grouping solely by this main ingredient. An appliance that might cook your stew very well might do a very poor job with samosas. The EPC is a good example of an appliance that fits that description. So thinking about heavy foods, this is often a term that's used by Kenyan cooks to describe things that need boiling for a long time. If you look at goat stew, or if you look at njahe beans, matumbo, which is tripe, or githeri, these all require boiling for a long time and then a bit of frying at the end. So you can see that by grouping these together by their cooking processes and time, produces categories that are much easier to match with particular appliances. You can draw up an appliance scorecard. For example, here I've just, using my own subjective judgment, I've created these scores for how well each of these two appliances cooks each of those, or performs, sorry, each of those different cooking processes. So the EPC is very good at boiling, it can't deep fry, and it's all right at shallow frying and toasting, whereas the hot plate's a bit more kind of an all-rounder. So you can see when we match these up with the heavy foods, the EPC is a really good match with boiling and does shallow frying okay, so it's a really good match with that particular category of food. On the other hand, if you're looking at the whole menu and you've got a range of different dishes, then something like the hot plate may be a better option. So it also depends upon the frequency with which you are cooking each of these foods. So in Kenya, we know that from our cooking diary analysis, we managed to record what types of food people were cooking and how often they were cooking them. So by grouping together all of the heavy foods, we realized that that actually makes up about a third of the menu. So EPCs are great for 1/3 of the menu. However, you've also got staples, which is another third. And actually, EPCs can cook most of these, but they require some encouragement of users. And then you've got the quick fryers, which are around 20%. And these are things like frying eggs or kales. And users will use these generally if encouraged, but the energy savings are more minimal. And then you've got the other dishes. You've got the other categories, the deep fried foods and the flatbreads. However, since these make up quite a small proportion of the menu, they're less important, which means that an EPC which doesn't do those very well, it could still be a good match with Kenyan cuisine. So I'm not going to go into these. I just want to briefly kind of show you what the thinking behind them was, which was a way of brainstorming information about food categories from an exercise that Jacob and Meron did to try and understand Ethiopian food. And then we also have an attempt at producing a global typology of food that's independent of a specific culture. So where you could, from all the data that we're collecting from each of the different local studies that we're doing, build up a pattern or build up a set of cooking patterns so that we can say, oh, in Tanzania, they also cook heavy foods. Okay, well, an EPC was a good solution in Kenya. That means it's probably going to be a good solution in Tanzania as well. So Jacob, using his background as a trained chef, has been able to think through the different elements that make up cooking and been able to think about, okay, well, what are the core differences between different recipes? Okay, so I'm going to wrap it up there because we are now 10 minutes over time. So thank you for those that are still with us. I don't actually have the Skype window on top now, so hopefully some people are still here. I just want to finish by saying what's next. Well, just like with the Tanzania and the Tanzania work and the Kenya work and the other, the Jikoni Magic Cookbook in Kenya and the Nepal kitchen laboratory, then I'd like to say that we are available. We are here on hand for supporting the design and the implementation and the editing of outputs from the kitchen laboratory process, both Jacob and myself. So please do get in touch with us if you are considering producing an e-cookbook or carrying out kitchen laboratory experiments. We are here to help. I'm very keen to support in any way that we can. We're going to continue building up this global typology of foods so that we can have a structured way of analyzing different contexts and a reference guide for new contexts. We are producing a kitchen laboratory protocols, just like the cooking diary protocols. The first one is going to be themed around the lockdown from COVID-19, a guide to experimentation in isolation. And we are producing a set of templates, or we are thinking about producing a set of templates for MECS eCookBooks that can balance having a standardized format with a consistent look and feel to create a series of cookbooks, and whilst at the same time keeping it open enough to be able to adopt new techniques from the broad range of skills and expertise we have within this group and more broadly within the program, and still be able to mold around the diversity that we see in local cooking practices. So I'm going to flip back onto Skype now and see whether anyone's still with us. I see we still have quite a few people, so thank you for sticking with us, and I apologize if you're like me, belly is rumbling at this point, talking about food during lunchtime. So I would like to open the floor for any questions for those that have persevered this long. Would anybody like to add anything to the discussion? Would they like to ask for any clarifications from our presenters, if those that are still with us?
I have a couple of questions.
Please go for it, Amani.
Firstly, I just love the cookbook. So brilliant job, Jacob, John, on those. And we're actually trying to explore how a similar style and simplicity of recipes, but also costs, can be included in product marketing and sales pitches in our work in Cambodia. A couple of questions here that came to my mind were, energy meters have been a key part of your studies, but if you think beyond a control group setting and think of an everyday household setting, do you have a sense of what potential energy meters could have in bringing understanding of unit costs for users?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think it is a really important part of behavioral change more broadly. Many people have the perception that electricity is too expensive to use for cooking. So simply being able to show people how much they are spending and in a format that is comparable to how they're currently paying for their cooking fuels is a key enabler for people to adopt, especially electric appliances for cooking. So either having a separate energy meter that is distributed alongside appliances, which I know is something that Agnes is doing in her Challenge Fund project, or having an appliance which integrates the energy meter and gives you a live readout when you finish cooking your dish saying, okay, you've just spent 10 shillings now. Or even better than that, going a step further and being able to load on that credit onto your meter beforehand, which then unlocks your device for that amount of cooking. If someone's buying a tin of charcoal, for example, or say 100 milliliters of kerosene to be able to cook a single meal, they need to be able to load on enough credit onto their electric cooking device to be able to cook that single meal in the same way. Amai, did you say you had another question as well?
That's great. Thank you, John. Yes, I do have another question. Have you considered, and this question could apply for Agnes too, I suppose, have you considered strategies to connect this kind of information that's currently at, let's say, digital platforms and social media, is there a thinking of connecting this with, and by this information, I guess I mean the recipe books and the diaries. Is there? Are you guys thinking to connect this with suppliers and device manufacturers?
Absolutely. So we have one of our international liaison managers who I don't think is with us today, but I will definitely send a recording to. That's Nick Rousseau. So his role in the program is to bring on board the big Indian and Chinese and multinational appliance manufacturers. So I think this is the other end of the puzzle. I mean, we work together quite closely. I mean, my role in that is more the understanding of how people cook. His role is more who's making what appliances and how could we get them to sell them to our target customers. So clearly there is a role for the two of us to interface. I know he was working on an appliance, it was an appliance selection tool. Did anyone attend Nick's session on the appliance selection tool at the MECS program workshop? Unfortunately, it was in parallel to the one that I was doing on behavioral change. Did anyone go to that?
So, John, I think if you remember, I think they decided all to come and join you in your presentation after a short while.
Ah, okay. Okay.
And just to follow up on that as well, the Tanzania eCookbook is going to be distributed with SESCOM appliances, which is an arm of Tatedo. John, you might know more about the distinction between Tatedo and SESCOM and how the eCookbook is going to be distributed, but it's more of a private entity, I believe, and the Tanzania eCookbook will be distributed with that in Tanzania.
Yeah, so Tatedo, I think, is the NGO branch, and then SESCOM, Sustainable Energy Services Company, is the private company, and they now have a SESCOM branded EPC. So they've been making smaller inserts that will go into the box in the factory in China around the key kind of messages from the cookbook, the key recipes. And then I think the cookbook itself, I don't know if Katerina is still with us to confirm or not, or I think Anna's just dropped off. But the cookbook itself is larger, so I don't know whether it would go with every EPC inside the box or whether it would be distributed at the point of sale. I know this ties into some of the service prototypes you had around repackaging of appliances to adapt them around local foods and the priorities of local cooks.
Yes, absolutely. And that was kind of my angle, wondering whether there's any thinking and insight around connecting better these messages and the information, and in some sense taking it outside a cookbook format and closer either onto packaging or, finding ways to just boost that behavior change. So everyone knows that information alone doesn't lead to action. So how do you create a pathway to boost that engagement with the information?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. I think Jacob and I realized halfway through making the Kenya eCookbook that we didn't actually need a cookbook. That wasn't supposed to be the end product of it, and we almost didn't write it in the end because we've got all this great data and we thought there's way better ways of sharing this information. People like Agnes, for example, they've already got 50,000 followers on YouTube. So why do we need to write a book? None of the cooks that we'd interviewed said that they'd ever read a cookbook or had any desire to ever read the cookbook. But I think Jacob's suggestion, which is very correct, is that we should still write it down and we should still publish the cookbook, but then it becomes more like a repository of information that we can share with other researchers, with policymakers. It seems to have been quite successful in that field too, largely through Simon's efforts. But then also it's like a reference book for transmitting that information to practitioners who can then take it and produce their own more digestible knowledge products from it. People like Agnes will produce videos after they read the cookbook. So it's really great to see that vision playing out, and well done for Jacob for persuading us to actually finish the cookbook. Do you have any more comments from anyone else?
I just had a general comment. From this weekend, I've got 2 electric pressure cookers. One which is double the price of the other one. I've been cooking the same thing on them together, and the more expensive one is 5 minutes 5 minutes slower than the cheaper one. So I guess this is a question to Biraj. And were you using the same electric pressure cooker for all the kitchen lab tests you were doing? And then just more generally, how we're going to determine these differences? Because I put 20 minutes on both of them, they're both timed ones, but the preheating section took so much less time, 5 minutes or 7 minutes less time than for the other one. Anyway, I thought I would ask it.
Okay, so for the information that I shared was only one type of electric pressure cooker, but in the next round, what we want to purchase whatever type of electric pressure cooker available in Nepal, and then we will have like diagnosis analysis of all the types of pressure cookers. So there are currently 4 or 5 types of, 4 or 5 different brands that are available in Kathmandu, in Nepal. So next step will be using all of them and find out what are the differences. But the information I shared was only from a single branded and single electric pressure cooker.
So just to follow on from that, we are in the process of carrying out a Global Leap Awards program with CLASP. So the awards program is designed to test different appliances against each other and find the most energy efficient, the most usable, the most durable, and the safest. So this program will carry out comparable tests on a range of models of electric pressure cooker, which will result in the production of a buyer's guide, which you could consider it's kind of like an eCookBook, in that you're really looking at it from the other side, the other way around. The appliance has already been identified, and you're really trying to focus in on which one is the best one. And it may not be that there is a best one for all applications. One might be really good at boiling. So if you've got a culture where boiling is a big part of the cuisine, and where, for example, people may have another stove already, like LPG, to do the frying part of cooking, then maybe that's the best model to go for. Whereas if you're looking to promote a single device which can cook all of a particular household's food, then you may want to go for one that's a bit more of an all-rounder, not so great at boiling, but can also do frying, shallow frying, and deep frying.
One more thing, John, like we are just thinking like to improve the convenience of cooking EPC, that as I said, like one options that might be interesting to see in the new EPC is like, so because we are either in not so much reliable grid connected area, so in that case, if we are cooking rice and after 10 minutes there is no electricity, and after 20 minutes then again it comes, then at that time the EPC should start from the time when it was off. So that might be improve the conveniency. And another thing, like we purchased some smart plug meters that can be connected from the mobile phones. Now people have smart mobiles. Then if, for example, so I put pulses in my EPC and make everything ready, and plug in the smart plug-in meter. Then when I leave my office, then I just start that from my office, and then when I am in my house, then the rice or whatever the dishes was there, so it should be cooked. So maybe these two kind of new features might improve the convenience in the future. I don't know, like if you have been talking with these people.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we have got part of the test for the Global Leap Awards is about what voltage does the EPC turn off. But what we actually don't have, which you've brought up and is very relevant to include, is what happens when the power comes back on. I know that the mechanical EPC, so the ones with the rotary dials, the timer just keeps clicking round. So if you've pressurized, then even if the power goes off, it will just keep cooking, even though there's no power going in. If the power comes on and it's a long cooking cycle, then it will simply top up the heat and continue the timer until the end. But most of the button ones seem to just forget their program, as you've described. So that's definitely something we can very easily add into the protocol. What happens when the power goes off, and then what happens when it comes back on? Does anyone else have any comments to add? Any of the people who are looking to carry out kitchen laboratory experiments in particular? I see we've got Harry from HEVOS here. I'm not sure whether Maren is joining us this time, but given that you are carrying out kitchen laboratory experiments at the moment, is there any kind of reflections on what we've talked about here and the implications of how you might carry out your activities over the coming months? Harry, if you are talking, you are muted, by the way. Okay, not sure if Harry is still with us. So I think let's wrap it up here. Any final burning questions?
I was just wondering where we can get the other cookbooks from, the non-MECS ones, if they're available online or not, to have a look in more detail.
Yeah, it's a good question. There are actually all MECS ones, which we've brought up a very good point. It's a good job that Simon's not here, and Nigel, please don't tell him yet. But the Jikoni Magic one, I think it might not have a MECS logo on. It is definitely a MECS cookbook because it was produced under MECS Challenge Fund. The other one, the Tanzania one, is also a MECS cookbook, but it didn't have the front cover in that file. It does definitely have the MECS logo on it. So the reason why you can't see the Tanzania one is because it hasn't yet been published. That was a sneak preview. So in the next couple of weeks, that should be up on the MECS website. If you want it now, you can log on to the MECS Field Researchers folder, and then you can go into the folder, the subfolder for this particular seminar, and you can find it in there. You can also get the Jikoni Magic one there as well. And I'll follow up with Agnes about the logo. Let me just double check whether it is on there or not, because we'll need that before we put it up onto the MECS website. Any other questions whilst I'm doing that?
I just had a quick question. It's Sam Williamson from Bristol. I was just wondering how everyone found a reception of their cookbooks and whether people were actually using them. John, you were saying they were used by policymakers, but I was just wondering about other uptake of cookbooks.
I think Agnes's cookbook is one that's much more likely to be used by everyday cooks as the kind of tool that you'd have laying on beside your stove as you're cooking, or up on your smartphone as you're producing the recipe. I think, yeah, the Kenya eCookbook, it's something that people would read and would digest and would then do something different in the future as a result, rather than the step-by-step guide for as you're cooking. Agnes, if you're still with us, would you like to respond to Sam's comment? How are people using your cookbook?
They are using it to, how do I put it? When they want to make a particular dish, so they're just going to the cookbook and just opening and cooking that particular food. It's especially useful for people who've never used an EPC before.
Yeah, and I guess, Agnes, yours is also supplemented by video recipes as well. And it's very much in a similar style to these step-by-step recipes here, where you have the view over the pot and you can see what the food looks like at all times during the process, which is a really helpful way to make sure that what you're doing is the same as what the cook looks like. I know certain cookbooks are very frustrating, where you have simply a textual recipe and then it says, oh, once your onions are browned. Well, how brown? Like, is it like totally frazzled or just slightly colored? So yeah, I really like that in your style, Agnes, which I think is one reason why we got in touch with you in the first place after watching your videos and seeing how clearly you were able to explain the different steps. Okay, I think we should probably wrap it up here because we are now half an hour over time. So the final question for today is what should be the topic for the next seminar? I'm going to make a suggestion based upon a comment that we had from Jesse from Bern last time, which was around discussing adaptations to research based upon the restrictions from the lockdowns due to COVID-19. Equally happy to open the floor and ask for other suggestions from other people. Even if we don't do it next session, then we could do it in another session afterwards. So please do say now if there's any other topics you would like to explore in this session.
Hi, John. I think you suggested at the beginning of the call that looking at the CREST pilot exercise might be something useful.
Absolutely, yeah. I guess to let a broader group of people know what is going on, what the plan is, and to get feedback from a wider range of people with a wider range of expertise. Yeah, good call. Anybody else? Okay, Nigel, given that you've been more closely involved with the CREST prototype development, would you think that in 2 weeks' time or in 4 weeks' time would be better timing to get input on the CREST prototype deployment?
I think probably is John. Are you still there, John Barton? I'm not quite sure how the timescales are. Would it be better to just have this discussion sooner or later? I can't see if John's
I think John
there.
is not here
Pretty
anymore.
sure he left. Yeah, I think I saw him.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He's
How about
gone.
as an action, I'll get in touch with John, unless you want to make a judgment now.
I mean, I'd have thought that a month. I don't know when they're actually coming in. My inclination is to try and it might be better sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. Well, why don't I follow up with John just to confirm, and then we'll have either the adaptations to research methods due to the lockdown, which is also, I guess, a time-critical topic, or the CREST prototypes, depending upon what he says. Sound good?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. Well, thank you to everyone for staying with us, especially to Joni, who I see is still here and was taking notes for us. I'm sorry if I'm keeping you away from your lunch with all this talk of delicious food. Thank you for tuning in, and see you again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks to all you guys for presenting as well. That was really interesting.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Hi. Bye, John.
Thanks, Agnes. See you.
Yeah, thanks
Bye.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.